We stand at the most advanced point in human history. Look around you. The computers you see, the clothes you wear, the phones in your pockets are all the results of thousands and thousands of years of human advancement. We've come so far from our origins that the problems we face now are completely different from those our ancestors faced. Where they once worried about food, shelter, or the next tribal raid, we now worry about paying our taxes, studying for the next test, or who's going to win the next Super Bowl. We are extremely different from our ancestors, but we have one thing in common. One problem that has stayed with us over thousands and thousands of years: diseases. They have been the bane of human existence ever since we first settled down. In 430 BC, Athens, the birthplace of democracy, was brought to its knees by a plague so devastating that people began to question their gods. In the medieval ages, the bubonic plague killed anywhere from 30 to 60% of Europe's population. And recently, in 1918, the Spanish influenza was the biggest disaster in human history, killing anywhere from 50 to 100 million people, more than the two world wars combined. Excuse me. So diseases are a problem. In this last decade, we have had encounters with SARS, H1N1, and just this year, Ebola has come to the continental United States and is still burning through Africa today. We are fighting a war against something we can't see, but we can certainly feel the effects of. I'm a person that would like to contribute to this fight. I'm a researcher, studying diseases, how they work, and how to stop them from doing their job. But it's a long road. Most researchers don't begin the proper professional life until they're into their 30s, while other professions can start once you're out of college. And so I have a short list of goals to help me get there. SMART goals. My goals are very general. I'm a person who sees the long term, but I have trouble seeing the short steps. So these goals can be rather vague. Short term deals with this year and the rest of my high school career as well. I want to get all A's on my final 6 weeks report card. That hasn't happened in a while. And then I want to start running again. At the end of the school year, I want to be able to run 2 miles a day at under 20 minutes each. Keep me healthy, keep my grades up. My parents always taught me that your health comes before anything else, and then your grades come second. If you keep both of those up, you're going to have a good life. Midterm, I want to graduate college 3 years early, or a year early. Why? Because I want to see the world. I want to see what life offers me. And if I focus and cram everything in the first 3 years, I can get to do that quickly. Then after that, I want to spend time as a lab technician with the CDC or the World Health Organization. Scientists at universities who hold a teaching job have a very hard time with funding, which I'll get into later. The CDC and the World Health Organizations are government positions. Government positions are extremely stable and have a lot of resources to work with. Gaining experience there allows me access to all those resources. And then after that, I want to begin doctoral research. At this point, I'm probably in my late 20s, and now I'm working towards my doctorates. Long term, this might seem strange to you, but I want to start a family before I turn 30. My family has been a big part of my life. They've supported me through thick and thin. My parents also taught me that all the people you meet in your life are inconsistent. At any given point, they might disappear on you. But your family won't. Your family's supposed to stick with you through thick and thin. And so I want to have that base in my life. I want to have that security, that good feeling. And then for the majority of my career, I want to work at the CDC or the World Health Organization, because you can go all over the world with this job, and you have all the resources you can want, and the funding is not an issue. And then also, I want to get a high school teaching license, because although I do love researching, I also love teaching people. I love teaching them new things they might not understand. I love the look in their faces when they finally understand it. And so once I get towards retiring, I want to be able to still continue contributing to society, helping our next generation of scientists, entertainers, researchers. And so I first began my path towards being a researcher with this ISM program. I've had a wonderful, wonderful time in this program, even despite the lack of a mentor. I've learned that people are willing to help that this world is not cutthroat, that scientists are good people, that the knowledge they have, they want to share with me. And I was originally very prideful, but with my lack of a mentor, I finally swallowed my pride and said, I need to ask for help, and I have asked for help. I've asked an ISM alumni to help me with this, and he's been very, very good in getting me in contacts and setting up interviews. And it's also taught me how to be responsible for myself. Because ISM, unlike other classes, it's very, you do it or you don't. Coach Wysong, in particular, doesn't really get onto if you don't do it. He just admits that, hey, if you don't do it, you're going to kick out. Just simple as that. It's up to me to work and be successful in this program. And so, I've learned a lot about the technical research side. I've learned how to deal with bacteria and viruses at the same time. Some of you might know bacteria are becoming an increasingly large problem. Currently, we deal with bacteria through antibiotics, which basically straight up kill the bacteria and wipe the infection from our system. Penicillin, the original antibiotic, had almost a perfect kill rate. 99.9% of all bacteria were destroyed by its presence. However, nowadays, it fails 60% of the time. Why? It's due to natural selection. That 0.1% that initially survived was given time to grow and reproduce, and now its offspring have become the majority. And now, if this keeps happening with all sorts of bacteria and all our antibiotics, we will come to a point where antibiotics don't work anymore. We'll go back to an age where a simple cut on the leg that gets infected could easily mean life or death. And so, when I talked to David Greenberg at UT Southwestern, I mentioned this to him. And he, coincidentally, was also working on this. He was working on antisense treatment for bacteria. The way it works is researchers first find the bacteria, analyze its genome, and then find what makes it tick, what makes it dangerous to people. After they do that, they synthesize mimicking molecules that mimic the DNA nucleotides that the people or the bacteria use. So they send it into the bacteria. And this bacteria grows again, replicates, but now it uses those mimicking molecules as part of its genome. Now this might not seem a very big deal because the bacteria is still kicking, still doing its job, but now the next generation is unable to reproduce because the DNA or the mimicking molecule is now too stiff to allow DNA synthesis to occur. Basically, the bacteria is now unable to reproduce. And so, it gives our body time to fight back. Our body's very good at its job, just sometimes it gets overwhelmed. Antisense doesn't straight up kill the bacteria, it just gives a helping hand to our body. And then I also learned a lot about HIV and treatments. HIV, if you don't already know, is a virus that attacks our immune system and destroys the thing that's supposed to keep us healthy as people. The two main reasons why it's such a hard virus to deal with is that it establishes viral reservoirs in our bodies, areas so deeply infected, but they don't produce viruses. So our treatments are unable to target those areas. Second reason is that it has an extremely high mutation rate. The HIV virus does not contain any proofreading mechanisms for DNA synthesis. Ordinarily, that would be a major problem because offspring would have an extremely hard time staying alive with all the improper mutations. However, in this case, it allows it to survive in the long term. Because in a single patient, the virus mutates so fast, you can have multiple strains of HIV at any given point. This results in treatments that would work for one being unable to work for another. So scientists have come up with ways to deal with HIV. One was immune system transplant. In 2008, the Berlin patient was completely cured of HIV. First time that has ever happened in history. They did this by first erasing the patient's immune system and replacing it with one from a naturally immune donor who had a mutation on the CD plus 4 T cell, which the HIV virus affects initially. They did this by transplanting bone marrow from the natural donor to the infected patient. Within a year, the patient was now completely HIV cured. And so scientists are looking towards that as a possible treatment. The issue right now is that the treatment is extremely expensive, extremely slow, and extremely dangerous. You're wiping out your immune system, for crying out loud. There are going to be issues with that. The second treatment I learned about was something that was counterintuitively productive. Scientists were looking to accelerate the mutation rate of the virus. When I initially read it, when I heard about it, I was kind of confused. Like, how is this going to help? Well, scientists did studies, and at a certain point, if you increase the mutation rate too much, the entire population of the virus collapses within an organism. They did this in cells, and it worked perfectly. However, when they transplanted it into patients, the mutation rate increased, but the population of the virus in the patient never decreased enough or never collapsed. So it is promising. We just have to tweak it a little more. And so I mentioned I love the raw research side of things, but I also understand that there are technical issues, real-world issues that you have to take into consideration as you're researching things. Main one is funding. Most applications for funds go through the National Institute of Health. However, the funds are much smaller than the scientists who want those funds. 1 out of 10 grants are accepted by the National Institute of Health. And those grants that are accepted are what are deemed necessary for society. And who deems what is necessary or not? It's the people, politicians, and voters. And so my original work idea came from a thought of interconnectedness, how everything is connected, how what happens in one area of life affects another. So what I was mainly testing for was a positive correlation between age and certain research preferences. I was looking for, as you got older, certain preferences for research in a certain disease would go up and others would go down. I was looking at high research preferences for STDs in young people like you and I. And then as you got older, middle age or so, early 30s, late 40s, the preference for cancer research would go up. And so that's what I did find. I did find that as people got older, the cancer preference would go up. Initially, the cancer research preference was 40% in young adults, and as you got older, it rose up to 65%. This was relevant to me because, as a researcher, I'm going to eventually need funds to do my job. And so those funds come from the public, indirectly. So what they want to be researched will eventually be researched more. However, I did find interesting things. I found that young adults are not more prone to preferring STD research than cancer. Cancer was still number one, and mental disorders still overcame it. I chalk this up to the massive campaigns that nonprofit organizations have done, as well as the government. However, there were issues that affected what the outcomes I had. I also asked them, where do you want these funds to come from mainly, the government or private companies? I noticed that the vast majority of young individuals wanted private companies to provide these funds. They're thinking companies are more efficient, they do the job easier, and as you got older, people became more inclined to ask the government for help. This might be a long shot, but I assume this is because young people don't trust the government as much as the older individuals do. They're more idealistic. They still dislike the government to a certain extent. And then issues I had were that my sample sizes for the older age group were significantly smaller than my younger age group. I noticed that it would affect the outcome, that the numbers might be lopsided, misrepresenting certain answer choices, so I had to take that into consideration as well. And then I asked a question on my survey that was asking, how much money do you prefer to be spent on research? This was a very, very bad question to ask because I didn't give my subjects a framework to work on. I didn't give them something like, the NIH provides this X amount of money And so the numbers were all over the place, anywhere from 2 billion to 100 billion. And so I couldn't get any useful data out of that, so I just threw those results away. But I did learn from it. I learned that I have to be careful with what I ask. I have to remember that there always has to be context, and use this knowledge for the future. So my conclusion. I've come an extremely long way today, or a long way since I first started ISM. ISM is a wonderful program. I've learned a lot about what I want to be when I grow up, how to do this, and I'm really happy with this. However, some of you I see are disinterested in what I just said. You're all on your computers, reading a book, something like that. But I'm still happy you guys are here. We're all here to learn in the program. We're all learning how to be individuals in our chosen profession. Some of us are learning how to directly help others. Some of us are learning how to teach others. Some of us are creating things for others to use. We're all learning as a group to help be contributing members of